people must understand and the agitating youth must understand, the military is not just a job, it is more than a job. And you get no bonus checks for being willing to go and die in an operational situation. It might be very difficult for army units to integrate them because these guys know they're not there for the long haul. So they'll tell the Subedar, "Listen, साहब, मैं 4 साल बाद तो जा रहा हूँ, मेरी जिंदगी में इतने कष्ट मत लाओ." There has been a lot of interest, both positive and negative, about the recent Government of India's announcement of the Agniveer scheme for the youth of the country. Now let us understand the basis on which this scheme has come into being. The armed forces and the army in particular has been grappling for some years with a problem that its pension bill is coming close to 50% of the pay bill of the armed forces and the army in particular. In a few years, if this wasn't contained or controlled, we would be spending more on pensions but less on the pay and salaries of our soldiers, servicemen, airmen, naval staff, everybody. So there was a lot of debate in South Block as to what should be done. One of the things that came up was the need to make the military lean and mean and more tech savvy. And that could be done by a fresh approach to recruitment of soldiers. Now there are merits to it and there are demerits of it. The merits of this is that the military sends home close to 45 to 50,000 soldiers every year on pension. By the new Agniveer scheme, the government has been made to understand that over a period of time, the pension bill would be reduced, but not overnight, because those who are serving over the next 15-20 years, they will still be there in service and still be pensionable. And the pension bill is already 1.19 lakh crore. And that is close to, I would say, in the range of at least 1/3 of the overall defense expenditure in terms of the revenue expenditure. But this new scheme that has been unveiled by the government, broadly speaking, was targeting the youth between the age of 17 and a half and 21 years. And after agitations hit the streets in various parts of the country, where many young men had been expecting to get a possible route to entry in the armed forces, felt they were cut off from this possibility because they were above 23. And having lost 2 years when no recruitment to the army took place, whereas the Air Force and Navy did recruit some numbers, a lot of people were disillusioned, and these were certainly parts of the groups that took part in agitations, but there was no reason for them to resort to such crass and unethical way of agitating by burning buses, trains, and doing damage to national infrastructure. Clearly, some political parties were prodding them on to show the government of the day in bad light. And also there are some professional agitators who for a few hundred rupees would be happy to go and create chaos on any street in any city. But going back to the Agniveer scheme, this was essentially looking at recruiting about 40,000 men into largely the armed forces. Eventually this scheme would also be opened to women, but not now, because the bulk of the Jawan force in the armed forces and the army in particular is made up of men and not women. They are being gradually inducted into some places like the military police, but it's a far cry from how it happens in Western armies. So we cannot adopt the model of Western armies entirely. The Agniveer scheme would take in about 40,000 odd men, young men who could have gone for graduation but were determined to wear the uniform. So they would come, get selected, and the selection process for them would be rigorous. There would be no concessions made to make numbers acceptable as the government has announced. So if you are short in height and you don't meet the height, weight, and other medical parameters to be a soldier, you would not be taken in. You could be very bright. Likewise, the government's intention is to provide able-bodied men, largely for the fighting arms and within which the infantry. The infantry, as an old adage goes, is the cutting edge of the sword. And the infantry needs men who are fit, who are motivated and willing to die because they are on the front lines, either on the LOC or on the LAC or on the high Himalayan heights around Kargil and Siachen, or fighting in the valley, or even elsewhere in Assam and other parts of India where there are insurgencies. This is no easy job. It is very demanding on the mind and the physique. And those who are faint-hearted but want to wear a colorful military uniform to make a few pictures of theirs being posted on Instagram are making a wrong choice. Because the military is about being understated, is about being committed, and is about being able to do more than just a job. People must understand, and the agitating youth must understand, the military is not just a job, it is more than a job. And you get no bonus checks for being willing to go and die in an operational situation. The second point is that these people who will be recruited, the government's plan, which is a questionable plan and which many ex-servicemen are very upset about, would be hitting hard at the existing regimental system of the infantry units and older regiments of the armored corps, where troops are divided as per the region they come from in what they call single class or mixed class regiments. So largely you will have Sikhs from Punjab and maybe a bit of Jammu district and elsewhere joining Punjab regiment or Sikh regiment. They wouldn't join the Gurkhas. And likewise you will have Jats who will join either the Jat regiment or the Rajputana rifles or the Grenadiers. A Jat will not be put into a Kumaon regiment. A Kumaon who's a Pahadi will serve in a Kumaon regiment, or he will serve in one of the affiliates of the Kumaon regiment, like some of the scout battalions. And people from the northeastern areas are put into the Naga regiment or the Assam regiment. Why, you would ask? Why in a modern India which should be homogeneous, why are these segregations? The reason is these are historical segregations. Many of the regiments have histories that are 150 or 200 years old, and they have systems that work. If you are from Haryana, you have different eating habits than somebody who's from the Garhwal Hills. You have different customs. Your language and the way you joke or abuse is something which is familiar to others who come from your area. A Maratha or a Maharashtrian being put in with Sikh soldiers, there is a problem of their mixing together and working well together. It has been tried in some regiments, no doubt. Mechanized Infantry Regiment is one of them. But over a period of time, they've had to do a lot of adjustments to come up with workable solutions, where a Subedar is able to address all the men under him in a similar language that they all understand. You can't have a Gurkha Subedar talking to troops who are from Haryana or Punjab in Gurkhali. And likewise, you can't have a Sikh NCO or a Jat NCO talking to Garhwali and Kumaoni in Punjabi. The language is one issue. Eating habits are others. Tradition, customs are others. The way they pray, the way they celebrate. These are things that bind men together. And these are things that allow them to go beyond the call of duty and happily die for their naam and nishan. And it's not necessarily the naam and nishan of the country, but it's the naam and nishan of their biradari, the regiment, when they go to battle, as has been shown since independence in so many wars, and since World War I and II, when the regimental system had come to prevail. By playing with it, the politicians and the senior leadership of the army are making a gross error of judgment. And this is going to have long-term ripple effects, which will have a national security implication. The other aspect is the soldiers who will do a 4-year tenure. Many ask what is going to come out at the end of the 4 years if we don't make the grade, because only 25% will stay. That's 10,000. What happens to the other 30,000? Well, you're not getting a bad deal because you're getting paid while you're there for 4 years. And if you'd gone to a local college in the village or township you came from, because this recruitment is largely for the Jawan cadre, you would be sitting in a cafeteria or a canteen and having endless cups of tea and samosa with really no future to look forward to. No savings. You come out of the service after 4 years with 11.7 lakhs tax-free in your hand, plus savings from the salary that would be in the range of 20-25,000 rupees on an escalatory level over the 4 years every month. Some say you would be even saving up to 18-20 lakhs. And that's a lot of money to be able to start life all over again, either as an entrepreneur or to buy equipment for your farm to make it bigger and better, or even to go and do a master's degree, a banking degree, an MBA, an IT qualification, and then join the technical force in the country elsewhere. Because nowhere is it written that you are a good citizen only if you continue to wear uniform for the rest of your life. You can be a good citizen if you contribute to India's growth as an IT superpower. You can work in Government of India sectors, you can work in the banking sector, even you can be a school teacher, and you can be a model school teacher for the children in the school because you would have been inculcating in them the same values you picked up in the army. Discipline, punctuality, honesty, integrity, and a willingness to go beyond the call of duty, whatever the duty may be, whether it is to teach extra hours in the evening after school time is over, or to drive the bus of a government bus undertaking even after your duty hours are over and make sure every passenger is dropped to their destination. You could get absorbed, as the Home Ministry has said, in the police and paramilitary forces and other Home Ministry organizations, and that's a good thing, but there is a catch here. The leadership of the police and paramilitary forces have traditionally been averse to absorbing military men in their organization, partly because they believe the military inculcates a do-or-die culture, which in the paramilitary is not necessarily there, and lesser so in the police, where, as we all know, every other citizen in the country has a complaint about the police and how they deal with us and their integrity levels. So people coming out of the military might be a mismatch in those organizations. But if you want to use their skills properly, you can make good use of them, because here you will have a force that is trained to do the job beyond the call of duty. There are other areas of concern also. One is the regimental system, as I explained to you. The other is that within the army, these people who come in for 4 years, it might be very difficult for army units to integrate them, because these guys know they are not there for the long haul. So they'll tell the Subedar, "Listen, साहब, मैं 4 साल बाद तो जा रहा हूँ, मेरी ज़िंदगी में इतने कष्ट मत लाओ। आप उन सैनिकों को सताओ या उनको और ट्रेन करो जो आपके साथ अगले 20 साल के लिए." Now this will create a certain degree of disconnect, a certain degree of rebellion within the soldiers and the forces. And the other aspect is, recruits are not necessarily willing who are conscripted. If you're going to have them, the younger generation, as frontline force, conscripts historically are not willing to die. Russian forces had this problem in Ukraine, that 25% of the Russian army that was fighting in Ukraine frontline troops were conscripts. When the first few bullets were fired at them from the Ukrainian side, they threw up their hands and they surrendered. So many of Russia's plans went wrong and awry because the troops were not willing to fight in the front. You could have the similar problem with these kind of recruits. So where do you deploy them? You pay them salaries, you give them a package, but you can't have them as frontline troops because the Subedar will tell the officer कि साहब इस लड़के पे भरोसा नहीं कि ये टिकेगा कि भाग जाएगा मोर्चा छोड़ के. And the last and most important problem is that the aim is to try and keep a tech-savvy army out of these youngsters. Technology per se doesn't win wars for you. America had all the technologies with them in Afghanistan, but they still could not win the war. Russia has all the technology and they still have got a bloody nose in Ukraine. What you need is a willingness to die for your country, and that somebody coming to look for a job under the Agniveer scheme may not be the best possible person who is willing to put his life on the line. And finally, there is a certain degree of resistance within the army's old-timers and retired people that the army's infrastructure, the core composition of the military should not be disturbed. I agree with them to some extent, but I don't agree entirely. You see, we need to change as we go along. The military needs to be trimmed down. We cannot have a 12 lakh plus military with no processes in place to try and make it a 10 lakh strong military, lean, mean fighting machine and tech savvy. But there are other ways also to do it. I think the central point here is, do we need to disturb something that has worked so well for the country? Or do we need to have this scheme alongside with other schemes that collectively will give India both a lean, mean fighting machine and possible opportunities for employment for a youth that is desperate to wear the uniform? That is a big question that can be answered subsequently.